everybody. Welcome to the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio. My name's Jason Crable. I'm the executive director here at the center. Thank you all so much for being here today. The nearest Faraway place is open now through April 27th. It covers both our main galleries on the second floor as well as extends down into our lower gallery as well. We're very excited. I need to thank, not me, I want to thank the Fox Foundation, Inc. and Patrick and Brenda Smith, who are incredible sponsors for this program. Dave Terry is a native of Columbus, Ohio. He's a self-taught painter and artist, and he is Columbus's best.
Only, I think. Only.
I'll say best.
You got to be the best if you do what you want.
He's the best artist in Central Ohio, if not the state. His own paintings and monotypes have won numerous awards and have been exhibited throughout Central Ohio. His works can be found in private collections, corporate collections, and in museums around Ohio and around the country. He's completed restoration of over 5,000 pieces in his career on works from private collections as well as major historical pieces completed for the Ohio History Center, as well as the State House and Ohio State's John Glenn Library, Faculty Club, William Oxley Thompson Memorial Library, and the Byrd Polar Climate Research Center.
Very good. He does. Who wrote that?
Dave is a knowledgeable curator creating exhibitions for the Columbus Historical Society, including the evolution of Columbus art in 2019 and the art of Eduardo Affieri in 2023. And the evolution of Columbus art exhibition in 2019 at the Columbus Historical Society was what caught our attention and why we reached out about doing a show extending to all of Ohio. So if you saw that show, you know how incredible that work is. Constance Terry, but they call her Connie. Yeah, hails from Southern Indiana. She attended the Columbus College of Art and Design from 1986 to 91, where she studied under Ben Kajetani, Kurt Bensley, and Lowell Tolstep. Did I say those names right? Bon. That is. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, I guess right. And has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree with an emphasis in ceramics. She's a retired art instructor and manager from Columbus Park, Rexon Park Department, where she conducted numerous art classes, activities, and events for all ages in several Columbus communities for over 31 years. So she's a well-established and renowned art educator as well. Her own artwork consists of monotypes, low-relief carved stoneware, and handmade lampwork, jewelry, and is also in private collections throughout Indiana and Ohio. So for the past 32 years, Kami has also worked in art restoration and appraising historical works alongside her husband, Dave. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Connie and Dave Terry to talk about the nearest faraway place.
Welcome to the nearest faraway place. It starts here. We are the nearest faraway place, and I'm going to explain a little bit about that, but I'm going to let Connie start off.
Yeah. And some of you heard, some of you came in a little bit later. We are going to just touch on not all of the paintings, not all of the works on the show, and then we'll walk through later and we'll give you some information over here, and then we'll talk about even more things about the works and maybe some interesting stories when we go over to the gallery space. So when we came up with the theme, we talked about what do we want to do? What do we want to show people? And the point was to really expose people to some information and some artwork that you don't normally get to see. So a lot of what you see in this show could be artists that you know, but maybe works that haven't been shown before or rarely been shown. And you're going to see a lot of artists that have never been shown before. So there's a lot of talented art within the last couple centuries throughout Ohio, and that's what we wanted to have people learn from, and then take it from here. And the nearest faraway place, the subtitle is the Ohio's painters, makers, and their mentors. So we're going to talk a lot about that mentor-student relationship. We're going to talk about how we figured out there's kind of a lineage of sorts, albeit that family tree branches in some weird and different ways, but a lot of people have influenced other people throughout the state, some people from Cincinnati and some people in Columbus, vice versa. But then we have the separate schools of Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. So we're going to kind of touch on all those things. And the other thing about it being a hub and why people came here and why they ended up here or were born here and then left, Dave's going to explain.
There's a lot of artists in this room, and what's important, the whole process is still going on. The artists that are in here, I'm sure, will know a lot of the artists that they looked at, and all of us as artists pick out little things that we like from every painter, whether it be a sculptor or a painter, and we kind of incorporate them, but we take it a little step further. So in that way, they mentored us. And as we grow, people is going to take that from us. So everything that has been done, a lot of people say everything's been done. There's nothing else to do. What can I do that's going to be different? Well, you're different because you're taking little aspects of everything you see that you like that works. And then you make it into yourself. So how did we all become, and how did Ohio become a big hub? It's common sense, but a lot of us seem to forget about this. Early on, people don't realize that you could travel from France and you can travel to Columbus, Ohio without an airplane. You could come down through the St. Lawrence Waterway, through the Hudson River, through the Great Lakes through the Erie Canal, down the rivers, the Ohio River. And what cities had all the waterways? All the cities that are within 600 miles, basically, of a train ride from Columbus, Ohio, and Central Ohio, anywhere on the waterways. If you weren't on the waterway, you just traveled out a little bit when the train systems, and because there was not much past the Mississippi early on. The schools started building. So what brought us here? Artists can't just say, hey, I'm going to be an artist and make money. And artists here know that. That's why they call us starving artists. So they went to the factories. We had a lot of pottery factories where you could still use your art knowledge and still produce and still do your own thing, but also work and make a living. If you weren't wealthy, you had to have some way to subsidize and make a living, but still do your passion. So industry, everything was all due to travel, and it still is today. Now you can travel around the world very quickly, but think of what it took back then to say, hey, I'd like to take off and go from Chicago to Columbus, Ohio. Well, sure, you'll have to do it a different way, but it would take you a while. It's not just a simple, better pack a lot of bags. So that's part of how we, and why we call it, the nearest faraway place. We are near, but we're still far, but we can get to any of those places quickly. So all these big cities, Chicago, Detroit, New York, think of any city on the waterways, Cleveland, Cincinnati, all of them were along the way. They had their own things to offer. That's why the large colleges, universities, some of the first ones in the United States, were right here in Ohio. Not a lot of people know that. So Connie and I, this was a learning adventure for us too. I know a lot about Ohio art, but we learned a lot more along the way.
I learned a lot.
So let's start with one of the very first places where we are right now, and that's Lancaster.
So
that's where we're at, and switch to this first piece. And this is the only one that she has to figure that out. That's why she has the computer.
So essentially, we are going to take you on an historic art tour of Ohio. That's what this is. And so, yeah, we figured what better place to start than Lancaster.
Anybody been there? That is within probably, I think, a 20-minute drive from here. It's in the Hocking Hills. Some of you may have been there. I never have. This is a new one to me. I've heard several things. This is the Clear Creek Valley, and you'll see this is the very first painting you'll see before we start our trip in Ohio inside.
And this is Victor Griswold, by the way.
Go for it.
But no, go ahead with his bio.
He was interesting. He was a photographer. He lived here for approximately in Lancaster. I think it was came here in 1853. He was in Lancaster, and he would travel and paint, but he was a photographer, and he kept inventing process. He was trying to invent a new process for his photography. His brother and him had a shop here. Daguerreotypes just came out. Well, he invented a process called ferrotypes. So there was a lot of debate on which one was better. Of course, he said his was. And that was kind of his claim to fame. This is Clear Creek Valley, and somebody told me the other night at the opening that they've been here, they know where this is at. Jacob's Ladder. Does that look like Jacob's Ladder? So you know. Okay, and I guess you can still hike to this place today. Does it still look like that? Or do you remember that from a little girl? Is it in the Hocking Hills National Park? I mean, is it the park? So I don't remember it. I don't recall it. It's got to be very distinctive, in my point of view.
Before 1900, I'm sure.
This is one of the earliest paintings in the exhibition. So this is the first one you'll see. After you look at this, we will leave that this is in the foyer, and then we'll start going through the rooms. Southern Ohio, Northern Ohio, then Central Ohio. And that is all-inclusive. Northern Ohio, of course, being Cleveland, Toledo, anywhere up by the lakes. Southern Ohio, Cincinnati, Portsmouth, Duncan Falls. Who was from Duncan Falls? Anybody here? No? Duncan Falls.
Well, he was actually from Morgantown.
Yes, he was. What is his name?
Howard Chandler Christie.
Very good.
Yes.
Show me Howard Chandler Christie's if you go through. It's an interesting story there, too. But Marietta had some great artists from all over Ohio, but they had to go to institutions. And by the way, there was no art, what do I want to say? You couldn't become an artist through school. They were extracurricular classes. You couldn't get a degree in art until later on. And I believe the first degree that you could get in art was at the Cleveland Art School, which was called...
It was the women's...
that was Case Western Reserve. But that was for women. It started out for women only. Interesting from back at that time. So...
But I do want to emphasize, and we'll kind of talk about this too. Again, he did not make his living through being in a...
No.
Unfortunately. But he was a photographer, which is now looked at as more of a form of art than it was, I think, then at that time. But anyway, so Victor Griswold. And it is a lovely painting. So now we're going to go to the South Room, and
we kind of drew it all out for you. We got it so you could be a little lazy if you wanted.
we look at again, as Dave had emphasized, what brought the artists here. And there's the potteries in that region, the Rookwood pottery, Weller pottery. And then the Art Academy of Cincinnati, which I believe originally was called the McMicken School of Art and then changed over. But I want to start off with sort of the godfather of the southern part of Ohio, which was Frank Duveneck. There's probably only a couple painters in that South Room that were not really directly influenced by him. Whether these folks took classes under him and studied him or not, they were all had to be influenced by him because he was, a man of his day. So we'll get on with his.
He was actually the founder of the Art Academy in Cincinnati.
Yes, he was. And so Duveneck, like I said, he was the one that influenced a lot of them. And this work is a little bit brighter and lighter than his early work. He had schools that he started in Munich. He started another one in Paris, Bavaria, and then later on, he had a following, and we'll get to that in a second with the next painting too. But the Duveneck boys, if you've heard of the Duveneck boys, and there was the big group of them, and actually there were some women in that group too that followed along, and one of them was his wife, Elizabeth Boot. So after she passed away because she died at a young age, his work did get brighter and lighter from his travels and his studies in Italy. So you'll see some different types of works in the show too, how people changed. They may have started more tonalist, and may have started with a darker Munich style, and then they and they got brighter and lighter, maybe more impressionist. So you'll see those changes throughout the show too.
They stopped painting by candlelight. Think about that. If they didn't have electric lights.
True.
When you
So,
start.
and that's just beautiful. Love that painting. And so then, this is the main Duveneck boy. And Dave, do you want to talk about Twatman?
John Henry Twatman. Well, he taught just as many as Duveneck. This is an important lineage for Cincinnati. Twatman had quite a few students. He's still considered today, and if you've seen Twatman's work, they're hard to find and they're very expensive. He loved to paint Cincinnati and southern Indiana. A lot of artists left from down in that area and would go to what they call now Nashville or Brown County, the different places, and they would go for the foliage and the leaves. Twatman loved the Ohio River, and he also, I believe, he had a place in Cincinnati that had a lake with a waterfall. And if you ever look at his paintings or look at a book with a lot of Twatmans, he did that often. He was kind of a loner, a little bit of a loner, a little bit picky. They all drank, of course. But they spent a lot of time by themselves, and he painted. He did not paint in the studio a lot. He liked to paint outdoors. He was
And plein air painter.
yes, and plein air painter, which you've heard that, painting out, walking and carrying everything you have, walking and painting. Go ahead and go to the next one, which is also
Next was Charles S. Kalin, which then studied directly under Twatman, but was also influenced by Duveneck. He's
notice as we go on some of these in each room. You're noticing that the masters were a little darker. They all had a little more. Duveneck was a Munich school, which meant all the backgrounds were dark. Like when you look at a portrait of a governor or a president, they all were dark backgrounds and it focused on that George Bellows style almost. But that was all learned from the Munich school. When they started traveling, and they would all travel abroad, some of them stayed, some of them came back. When they came back, you're going to see a lot of examples of teachers, students, and then their mentors. But you're going to notice the color palettes. When you get inside, you're going to be awed by some of the color if you haven't seen it yet. You'll see the colors change. That's the color. You may see similarities about how things are balanced. This is very different, a different balance. This is all very hot. The horizontal, it's up higher, a lot of foreground, very off balance. And I'll show you something else about how they arranged things in their paintings that made them similar, even brush strokes. But you're going to notice color with a lot of them because that's what people wanted. Color changed. They learned it in New York, who was ahead of us, of course. We were Ohio. We were the cow town, the cow cities. We were farms. So go ahead.
We talked a lot about how people traveled back and forth, and some came here to make a living and be an artist. Some were born here, and then they moved away. And Kalin was one that studied here in Cincinnati, but then he was actually urged by Duveneck that he should go to the East Coast and he should head to Gloucester, Massachusetts, and really maybe get inspired by some of the scapes there. And he definitely was, because then he went there and he pretty much stayed there after that. So he's one that left and he stayed away. But that's what you see a lot of. Am I right, Dave?
Gloucester.
A lot of harbor scenes. And so he definitely was inspired by that. And you can see the impressionistic influences of his studies, you know, in Bears and Year.
You can almost see a little bit of what we call pointillist. Pointillistical, I'm sorry. He was a little more of a pointillist. Little dabs of paint. One stroke, don't touch it. No blending. He would just put the dab of stroke and leave it, which thrills me because it's kind of being a minimalist. But if you squint your eyes or get away from it, very impressionistic, and it all blends together. Kind of like your TV would. Sublimation, separate dots form one picture. And it was a new thing then.
What year?
That Kalin was probably painted around 1922, 26 to 22 to 26.
And so this is Elizabeth Norse, and she was one that did not directly take classes or study directly under Duveneck, but she was there in that southern Ohio, Cincinnati realm, and she definitely was influenced by him. As you can see, this is more of that, a little bit darker, a little bit more of a Munich style with the shadows, the way the shadows on the face. And you also see a lot of the women at the time, their themes, and this is throughout the show, and throughout these centuries, their theme was the mother and the child, and a lot of portraiture, because that is what women started out doing. And she became really successful at it. So much so, she was another one that went to Paris. She supported by her art a living for her and I believe her sister as well. And she stayed in Paris because she made it at the salon. They loved her. She was very successful. And you'll hear me say this about a couple of the women artists. It was unheard of during that time for a woman to do that. And so it's just a great thing. But
Very influenced by Mary Cassatt. Everybody knows that Mary Cassatt, painted mother and child. And when we're in there, you're going to see her in the studio with that painting. There's a photo of her in the studio with that painting on her easel. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
yeah.
It's a beautiful piece.
Okay. And this is
You
Dave's-
tell this story. This is my favorite painting of the show.
Dave's favorite, and one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites, though, of this show, but this is Herman Wessel. And Herman also studied under Duveneck, also taught with Duveneck at the Cincinnati Art Institute. And he traveled extensively to Paris, throughout Europe, all the same schools. And you can see the impressionistic influences there, too. And just that light on that painting. And you will also see, which I'm trying to think, do we put her in here? Yeah, we do. Bessie Hoover Wessel, his wife. And so she also did landscapes, but we decided to put one of her still lifes in. But, this was a couple that lived in Cincinnati. I believe they had a studio or home in Eden Park till their death. They were very close to Duveneck. They were married at his home. She also, she was a student and then became a staff member, but she only worked for 2 years, and then she married Herman. So it doesn't really say, but I wonder if at that time she could not be married to him and work there, possibly, all those rules. And
Nepotism.
and so she resigned. But yeah, I believe they had children, but they both, they had a family, and they both had careers as painters, which was great. And this is near and dear to my heart. Through researching Herman Wessel, I found out that he became a restorer later in life.
Poor God.
I thought that was great. And then the both of them actually became authenticators of Duveneck's paintings.
Yeah, they
knew this so
experts.
well, and they were so close to him. So
Notice one thing, too, as we're going along, and the artists in here will know this unless you've read about it. Not everybody does. You're going to see less and less use of the color black. Once post-impressionism started, they didn't use black. The Favists would use a dark line around things. It'd be very loose, but it would always be blue. So you're going to see a lot of blue instead of black, or blue mixed with brown.
Yeah.
It's not really black.
You
but
might
to
think
get
it's
their
black.
deeps and darks, no black. It was a no-no to use the color black. Go ahead.
So, and I love this piece. And yeah, I just kind of fell in love with the story of the Wessels, and, and rightly so, because my husband and I are both artists, and I feel that as well. So we have quite a few husband and wife artists in this particular exhibit. So let's move on to the Northern Room. Obviously, the Cleveland School of Art and different art clubs, like the Art Club in 1876 and the Cocoon Club, which not spelled with C's but spelled with K's, and the Butler Institute of American Art. Of course, everybody knows the Toledo Museum of Art today. It's one of the really great museums. And so these are also the godfathers here: Frederick Gottwald, Henry Keller, William Summer, a lot of the teachers that really influenced everyone. And so with that, we will go right to...
So this is going to be a great example of color, and you're going to notice the color in the next two
I can
arcs.
slip back if you want.
No,
Back
go
and
ahead.
forth if you want to see that.
This is one where you're going to notice the color. If you left Ohio and you used to paint what we paint here, and then you travel to France. If any of you have been to Paris, there was a different atmosphere. If you've been to Maine, when I painted in Maine, it's different than painting in Colorado. Colorado blue skies are different than any other sky. We don't have them here. There's a different color, there's a different feel, which makes an artist want to search for new feelings and express their feelings. So this is Gottwald, Frederick Gottwald, and he was influenced a lot of them. Then you go to his most person of the influence. Look at the colors of this. That's Paris.
You can see this.
Exact same palette. He went there and was blown away by it. Gottwald told him to go there. When he came back, he brought that back. And a lot of things changed at that time with the Cleveland School, all the schools up north. They started using different colors. William Summer was kind of like a Duveneck in a way. He became, has anybody ever heard of Birchfield? Became very wild, experimental, different colors that don't belong. He became almost a fauvist, hard line, totally different. If you look at, and even his early works were pastoral series, brighter colors, but just the basic color palette. Right. He started getting more into atmospheric. And this is a fantastic painting. An interesting thing.
Yeah, he'll show them where it is. They have to find it when they go in the gallery.
You know, the only reason they might get it, well, they will. In most of his Paris paintings, almost all of them, when he put a lot of figures, he put Monet in his paintings. So does anybody see Monet in there? Lower right with a white beard. Now, Monet wore white a lot. That was his, but he painted in white. But when he would go out, he would wear black.
That was his Sunday go to church.
Yeah, Sunday go to church. And don't tell me who's carrying the birthday cake. I had no idea. But that was the thing that Warshawski did.
Yeah, like a homage.
And he had a brother, Alexander. They were brothers that Alexander didn't travel there as much. He did a few times. Abel came back and really inspired his brother. So if you look at their paintings now today, Abel's more popular. Alexander's work I love just as much as his. Very bright color, beautiful, some of the best paintings that I've seen from Cleveland.
Yeah, and he was another example of, he was a student and then he came back and became a mentor. So he was a student of Gottwald and Keller and all those guys, and then left, came back and became one of the faculty, one of the staff at the Cleveland.
There was one artist that didn't like it, didn't catch on.
Oh.
I knew you'd get to.
So we got to talk about Charles de Klin first. This is another direct lineage of Gottwald, Warshawski, de Klin. And this is a little known artist, but you can see the similarities there too. This is another Paris scene, and just those violets and the sort of fogginess of that. And
I know a couple that here in this room that owned a painting by him. They got rid of it. I go, why didn't you let me know? But it looked like an Ohio scene. Nothing like this. And everybody that looks at this painting is fascinated by it.
You see this painting in the gallery too. You can
you're going to
up on the
really well.
The details that go back in the space. It's just beautiful, beautifully done. And the sky is just great.
And that's Paris Market. And that's called a Paris Market.
Then, so here we have Henry Keller, and another one of the teachers, the mentors. And Henry Keller also started off a little more realistic, maybe more tonalist, more Munich style. And it was brought back to him, the post-impressionism, and you can see those influences definitely. It's got the hard line edge that Dave talked about with the bright, pungent color and just those blocks of light on the buildings. And so let me flip back and forth here so you can see the direct influence on his student, which was Frank Wilcox, which again became a teacher in the Cleveland School of Art. And you see the hard line and the bright color. Wilcox, the story with him is when he first went over there and he got some paintings selected for the salon, and he did okay, and he brought back some things to his mentor, Henry Keller. And Keller looked at him, didn't really like him, and he said, you should have paid more attention to the post-impressionists. And they kind of scolded him a little bit, and Wilcox didn't really like it at first. He wasn't having any of that. But when he finally went to it is when he became more successful. So it's just how things change during the art world and still change, and, what people want to see.
I think all the artists have done something that they really like. It's funny, the things that you like, other people don't. And the things, if you put in a show, you go, I hate that painting. You'll put it aside. Put it in the show to be the first piece that sells. Drives me nuts every time. I don't know how it happens, but
You have to set them aside for a while. So anyway, that's Frank Wilcox. And he was also, he wasn't the head, but they called him the dean. He was the dean of the Cleveland painters after a while. So he ended up with a really good reputation as well. And this is Wilder Darling. And I'll flip back and forth on this.
oh, you guys got a better view than I have. It's
I know I see it right here, but. And you want to talk about Wilder Darling's in
Wilder Darling was very, very well-known artist from Toledo. He traveled a lot. He was also went to the Munich school. Very dark, very methodical. Did what everybody did. His big school was he was Dutch. He was trained by the Dutch masters of that style. So he did a lot of women on porches, sweeping with a cat in the corner, drinking milk, all dark. Showed women doing everyday chores. Kind of like if you know Alice Shelley's work, she started out doing that early dark Dutch things, and then she got brighter because of her travels. He became broke in his later years, had nothing. I think his wife passed away. He had nothing. So he met up with a person that was fairly wealthy that owned a wrought iron company, which also was fascinated by art, was not an artist in no way, shape, or form, and became an artist. Later on, you couldn't even tell the difference. He loved Dabini so much. He loved Wilder Darling so much. His name was just Dabini. And he owned a big company, was well-to-do, didn't have to paint, did it because he wanted to. He took him in and took care of him for the rest of his life. So this is just Dabini, and this is the Maumee River, and that, amongst all that mess, is where we've all crossed the river to go to Toledo. As soon as you get over there, of course, you go to Tony Paco's, but right on the right there is the Maumee Glass Factory. The Libby Glass Factory on the Maumee River. So Just Dabini actually loosened Wilder Darling up. He, in his old age, started getting very loose, painting differently, got out of the Dutch school totally. So this is a good example later on, and this is right about the time that Darling passed away, under the care of Just Dabini. He kind of took his mentor in and took care of him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, so they took that mentor-student relationship to a much closer level. You touched on something, Dave, and I just want to say that too. Throughout, you will see, and if you've ever studied Impressionism, obviously Renoir and all the Impressionists
Francois Millet.
did people doing those everyday things. That's the word you used, and that is it. And, they got away from stage things or portraits, but they wanted to show real life. And so that is what you're seeing. You're seeing those street scenes. You're seeing people do chores, the mundane kinds of things.
And they got back to that later on with the Ashcan School. A movement became the realists. So people think they're realists, they painted it because it looked real or very detailed, illustrative. It's not. Realist means, in these terms, people doing everyday life, caught off guard. Like if I snuck up behind you while you were doing dishes and you had this look on your face like, why am I doing this? That would be an example of a realist painting.
You can't really see how unhappy or happy she is on that film.
Boy, she's gathering hay
Got a big load of hair.
or wheat. Would you be happy?
But the light in that is beautiful, as well as in the Just Dabini. You see those influences, and so now I wanted to hit on some sculpture because that's near and dear to my heart as well. This is a terracotta sculpture by William Zorak, and Zorak was born in Lithuania and then came here and studied in Cleveland School of Art. But he also studied extensively throughout Europe, and along with his wife Marguerite, and I like their story too, the husband and wife story. But what's funny too, everything I read about all the artists when they were over in Paris and when they were over studying in Europe, they also on almost every one of them had said they met up with William Zorak. So I was like, well, he was over there partying and doing what he wanted to do. But he and his wife, if you get a chance, maybe look up some things on them. I don't remember what website it is, but there's correspondences, letters between them. that are just really nice, where they were just very respectful of each other, not only as human beings but as artists, and they talk philosophically about the art, and they just talk about how meaningful it is for them and how meaningful it is for them to grow as artists and
be equals. Even.
yeah, and be equals. And they did treat each other as equals. So, and he also was an accomplished painter, but we decided to put one of his sculptures in because people don't often see
And
that.
from Lithuania to Ohio. If he was alive, I'd say, why? But he came here.
And you'll see one of his quotes on the wall in the gallery where it talks about he wants to come. He's writing to her and he says, I want to go back to America and I'm going to show them, basically what he had learned to do them some good, something to that effect. So yeah, we're all about that. And so that sort of fit with our theme. So we like that. All right. So we're going to move on to, we have 2 rooms that encompass the Central Ohio artists. And obviously what brought a lot of people here was the Columbus Art School and the Columbus Gallery of Fine Art, the Ohio State University, and the Dayton Art University nearby in Ohio Wesleyan. And let me just go ahead and state, because it says it there, that's about Roy Lichtenstein, and Dave talked a lot about the access and how it's a hub and not so far away from all the cities. And it's an interview with Roy Lichtenstein where he says that the train does it overnight. And he means, from here. And he's talking about he's in New York and how easy it was to get to Ohio, how easy it was to get to Columbus. So that is why it is the hub, and we'll put that in there for you to see. So let's hit on the first one, which, Dave, you want to talk about this first?
This is Robert King. I think I met somebody that has one of his pieces at home. Was it here? It might have been the other night at the opening.
Oh, yeah. One of the docents told me that Robert King introduced her mother and father.
That's right.
Which is really awesome. Yeah.
Robert King, you can you're going to notice a couple paintings we're showing in a row here. You're going to look again. Now, this is not going to be so much color. This is going to be how they fill up and the way mid-century modernism is starting to take a little place. He was actually one of Roy Lichtenstein's teachers. He taught at Ohio State, him, Hoyt Sherman, and this was back the 40s and 50s, but they got there earlier and they studied under Hopkins. But Lichtenstein mentions him and everything he's done as being very inspirational and influenced him. Him and another artist, which I'll show you here in a minute. But I want you to notice the shape. The title of this is Pink Coral?
Sea coral.
Sea Coral. Sea Coral.
And his work was very
different for me.
He had, had a lot of different types of things.
And it is a collage, by the way. I want you to know that. You'll see it when you get in there. Okay.
Everybody knows. Roy Lichtenstein.
Now this is a very interesting piece because if you can read it from there, if not, notice it when you get in. It's hanging over the mantel in this particular room. This is a symposium that there was a series of 2 or 3 of them that Ohio State would have, and they would have guest artists come in with other speakers. So if you notice, visiting artist is Roy Lichtenstein, and this is dated 1966. And notice who he speaks with. His main teacher and mentor, and this is his main teacher who taught Roy everything. And Hoyt Sherman taught in a way at Ohio State that nobody had ever done. He would actually blindfold people and make them feel their space that they're working on. And he would have them paint. They would have them look at what they're going to paint. He would blindfold them and have them paint it. Roy Lichtenstein took a lot out of that and loved it. But then later on he did a quote, which we'll get to. But see the Ben-Day dots. If you saw what Roy Lichtenstein did before he got to this point, because he graduated, I believe, in 51, 49, 51, went back
45, he graduated and maybe, and I don't know.
But he was, what do they call it when you teach under a teacher, not a school monitor, like when I was in school, it was
TA.
There it is right there.
Well, I'm bad at numbers because, we always joke that artists and math and any kind of numbers doesn't matter.
So they did a series of talks, and this is from This is at the time period where Roy Lichtenstein just changed totally, and came up with the Binde dots. Just basically sublimation, pointillism, basically, but he's using the dots, and he's doing like an Andy Warhol thing, where it's what we see every day, but he's making it an art form. For instance, did Magritte do the toilet, or was he the
I
one?
believe that was
See, this is the Duchamp. See, I don't understand that. That's
Duchamp
just me.
changed the art world by basically saying this is art with the urinal.
You can make art for art's sake. So if you call it art, if it's something you do every day, it's art. This is the Binde dots. This is Lichtenstein's one of his very first Binde dot pieces that he started. It is the crying girl, and he's done her in every situation. This is an actual silk screen. To my knowledge, there's only one made, and this hung outside the door at Ohio State to advertise that that's the room that the symposium is in. And this came out of a professor's from Ohio State tag sale when he passed away. I found it in a whole stack of papers just out of the blue. Fantastic piece. But this is one of his very early renditions, and it's got fingerprints all over the back. So I believe Roy Lichtenstein probably did this. He wouldn't have let anybody else do it. It was something he was working on, and he talked about this particular style that he was moving to. And there's a quote in there that you'll see in 1966. And I think this is pretty cool. It's one of my favorite pieces also.
Really interesting. I always point out, these were days before computers, obviously, and everything was hand done. And so you can even see where it says presented by on the typeset. It's a little crooked. So I like that part about it. It just shows that human element.
Now, silk screen is the same as a serograph, if you've heard of that. It's just instead of a 4-color process on like a lithograph would be, this is printed like a T-shirt was. You do one color with ink, put a screen down, do another color. So this is only 2 colors. It's actually, the paper's white, so it's yellow and black is the only colors he used on this.
And again, going back to what Dave said about why people come to Ohio and the choices that were made to study here. The story with Lichtenstein is, and he noted this in an interview, that he wanted to go into art. His parents just wanted him to get a degree. They didn't care what it was in. So he looked and he researched, and Ohio State was one of the few places at that time that would
One of the only ones, yes.
in art studies. And so that was a perfect compromise for he and his parents, and they loved it, and it worked out for him, and then he became Lichtenstein.
Now, I believe this next one, yes. Now, this was Roy Lichtenstein's best friend. This looks a little more like Roy Lichtenstein used to paint when he was teaching before he did the Binde dot series, before he became Roy Lichtenstein. This is Stanley Tortowitz, and he also taught at Ohio State with Roy Lichtenstein. They both left school. When they went to school together, they left. Roy went to New York. Tortowitz went to New York, wasn't quite happy, couldn't make a living, couldn't make ends meet, came back. They asked both of them to teach at Ohio State. They did. Lichtenstein left, wanted to leave after his brief teaching stint, and went ahead and went back to New York and got very famous. He decided to stay. They both got a little upset. This is kind of cool. Roy Lichtenstein left Ohio State because he wanted tenure. They didn't give either one of them tenure, so he said, fine, I'm leaving. So he went back to New York. He didn't get tenure, and I have some photographs at home from him, Tortowitz, in his studio right before he passed away, and you can buy his paintings. Especially at this time, you could get them for $200-300. But Roy Lichtenstein started selling in the hundreds of thousands, now in the millions. So that's just how things work. I love this painting, though. And this was an award winner.
Yeah.
This was an award winner in the Pan Am Expo.
Rocks and Traps was what that one is called. And Tortowitz was originally from Michigan, and obviously most of you know that Lichtenstein was originally from New York. So once again, they came here.
Go back 2 real quick if you can.
Go back.
There you go. Now go forward, because this looks like a
Because Robert King also taught
Tortowitz.
Stanley Tortowitz
Yes.
as well. Yeah. Sigma Seals.
but a lot of change because they went and got different influences. But
Okay. All right. And these two melancholy boys have been painted by Lucius Cutchin. And Lucius Cutchin was actually born Lucius Brown. And interesting story about him is his mother died when she was very young, and so he just had his father, and his father had a lot of issues, a lot of problems, and couldn't take care of him, was not able to take care of him. So he was passed around from family member to family member, and finally he was adopted by a lady, a Mrs. Cutchin, Emily something Cutchin.
a wealthy lady in Columbus.
She was in, yeah,
That
she was
bought
in
art.
Columbus, and she was a big supporter of the arts in Columbus. So a lot of people know Lucius Cutchin as being taught by Alice Shilley, which he was at the Columbus Art School, and they were very close. But what we found out just recently, a little tidbit of information, is Mrs. Cutchin sent him to take classes when he was a boy with Harriet Kirkpatrick, who is also in the exhibit. And I'm trying to think, we have Harriet in here? There she is. And so it's just interesting, too, that as we go on with this, Harriet Kirkpatrick was next door neighbors to George Bellows. Now, we don't have a George Bellows on the show, but she was very close with him throughout her life and was very influenced by him as well. And she taught Lucius Cutchin and was a classmate of Alice Shilley. So there's all of that connection, you know, and which is really fun to hear for us. And so talk a little bit more about Lucius Cutchin. He died at tragically a very young age. Really, right after he had his first show in New York, he contracted.
His show was going on in New York.
Yeah, and he was just becoming famous. I mean, he was just on the verge of making it, and then he died. So there's really not that many of his paintings left.
All the paintings that he had a show in New York, he was a very shy individual. He found out later that he was gay, and that was bad back then. His show was opening in New York. He didn't know how to handle it, so he went out and drank. So it was very cold, and I think it was approaching sub-zero weather, and he was in a doorway in the campus area. So he stood in the doorway, hunkered down, and fell asleep, and he caught pneumonia. And a couple of weeks later, he passed away from pneumonia.
Tragic.
I think he was 36 when he passed away. So had a promising career. None of the paintings that was in the New York show, nobody's seen since. None of them have surfaced. Nobody knows who had them. None of them know where they went to. Have no idea today.
You know, you do see some still lifes by him and paintings such as these, but
You can almost count how many paintings are out there by him.
yeah, that's nice. So then we'll go to Harriet Kirkpatrick and let's talk about the shapes of the houses. You can sort of see that these
Areas like this, that's perfectly square, but they have that one stroke in it.
that they're stenciled, and this is watercolor, correct, Dave?
Yes.
And she, along with Mabel DeBrock King, and you can definitely see the stenciling aspect there with both of them. They were also classmates and friends. It was during wartime, and they needed to make a living as well, and so they were cranking these things out. That's why they stenciled it. And so
They were the first ones to do that, basically,
during the war when
other than the Japanese.
Right. So you can definitely see both of those influences. Not student to teacher, teacher to student, but just fellow students, fellow colleagues, fellow artists, always influence each other. And those of you that know, when you paint with somebody else or when you see somebody else's artwork, Dave and I always say it, when we go to a show and even walking in here, it inspires us to go home and do something.
Oh, yeah.
So, they definitely inspired one another. So, yes, and this is Mabel DeBrock King. And you want to say any more about her?
Well, gosh, it was Mabel Mason DeBraw. I don't know I don't know how many times she was married or where all those names came from, but she had 4 or 5 names. But she became Mabel DeBraw King, and I think her maiden name was DeBraw.
Yeah. All right, and this is Elijah Pierce, and call out the owner. Susan, raise your hand. Hi, Susan. Thanks for coming. And Elijah Pierce is the only one, I think, in the show that came to Ohio for love. He was from Texas. He was Texas. And he moved with his girlfriend, and then he later married her, and then that's when he started his barbershop, and he always carved wood. And they have many stories about him carving his wood and people wanting to buy his little,
Trinkets.
was what he called sculptures, and he would just kind of ask people, what do you give me for it, and that kind of thing. And then, he used a lot of, he was an outsider artist. Outsider artists use whatever they can use, old plywood, old logs, carve on things.
Found objects.
Old paint, old house paint.
He would go to automobile places that sold automobile paint and people that painted cars, and he would ask them to save the old paint. He would use glitter. He would use old glue for varnish on top of it, and it was already yellowed. Old glue, old varnish. So a lot of them that you see have yellow, drippy, droppy. Looks like old varnish or cigarette smoke. I get asked to restore those all the time. And I have a hard time talking the people out of it. I said, don't touch it. You want to leave that on there. That's part of his process. It's the aesthetic value of the piece. And tell the interesting story behind it.
I have some of that little drip on.
Yeah, if you look at, you'll see it in there.
And that definitely is Elijah Pierce. He put little gems in the eyes, and you see the little glitter on the base. This is Bad Leroy Brown. And so he and Susan did buy this piece directly from his shop. And do you want me to tell a story, or do you want to tell a story? So Susan was kind enough to share that with me, that she sort of got exposed to him at the Ohio State Fair, correct, and saw his work there and really liked it and wanted a piece. And so she went to the shop, and he wasn't there, but she bought this piece. And so then so many months, years later, she was at a venue where he and his wife were there. And so she went to him and said, how long are you going to be here? Can you wait for me? I can go home, and I want you to sign this piece, because it wasn't signed. And she said he was so kind and so nice, waited for her and signed it. And you'll actually see the evidence of where he started to sign on the back of the pants in EL, and the pen wasn't working on that paint, so he signed on the bottom, which you can't see. But I just thought that was a great story, because Susan actually met him, and everybody did say that about him, that he was so kind and gracious to people, and just a good.
Does everybody? Well, I'm sure you all have at some point. Has anybody been to the Columbus Museum of Art? Okay, they have a room just for basically Elijah Pierce. I think they had his barber pole, his barber chair, and you'll see all. And his most famous works were he was very outspoken about politics, religion, his feelings about all that. But he did what he called the Book of Wood, and it was passages from the Bible, and he was a minister also, so he used his Book of Wood to explain and minister to his ministries and to preach, and he traveled all over with it. It's hard. I don't know if that is all totally intact. I think there's a few pieces missing, but I know the Smithsonian has some of his work. I'm not sure who owns the Book of Wood, though, but if you can get your hands on it. There was 10 of them.
No, I was saying about 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Oh, there were not 3. No, I think there were 12 pieces of wood. If you get a chance, and if you ever run into don't pass things like this up when you're just out and seeing pieces, because pieces like this pop up, as we all know. I know there's some people in this room right now that has probably purchased one of these at some point for $2, $3, $4 on half sale day at Volunteers of America, because they just come out of a home, out of an attic. They forgot that they had them. So there's little gems out there still ready to be found. So go ahead.
I guess we better hurry.
Yes. Now you only got 8 minutes.
So touch on Roy Hopkins. He was also a mentor in Columbus, Ohio. He taught
at Ohio State.
Ohio State. His wife is also in the exhibition in Boyce Hopkins, and so she studied in Cincinnati. He studied in Cincinnati with Duveneck. So you see where those cross influences were. And then he went to Columbus and really made Ohio State's art program what it is today. It's really great. And everybody's familiar with Hopkins Hall if you've been there. And so that is a beautiful piece by Hopkins. And again, another mentor in Columbus, this is Irwin Fry, and he was a sculpture teacher. And Roy Lichtenstein talks about being taught by both of them, but especially Irwin Fry, as well as
William Oxley Thompson from the Ohio State Library in bronze. Irwin Fry did that piece.
So this particular piece is this one is a third of other parts called Reading, Writing, and Arithmetic. And he would cut the sculptures when they were large like this, saw them in half and chop them in pieces and put them together for transport when he would go to shows, and then put them back together for the shows. So you'll see in the gallery that over here on this left side of her, it's kind of raw cut plaster. So, but we have reading.
Looks like it was done with a butter knife.
Again, I'm bad with dates, bad with anything with numbers, and so Dave and I, we like the reading one better than the arithmetic.
Now, I know where the other two are, and I know who bought them, and I've tried to get them. They want mine, I want theirs. They ain't moving. And there was one small version made of it, too, about this big. And you'll see in there also there was a medal made with this on it. Fantastic sculptor. Everybody should know who this is. I don't think anybody's seen this particular one, though. This is an Alice Shilley you won't see every day. This is an oil, and it's very large. You'll love it. It will draw you to it when you walk in this room. And that's Central Park in the background. This was in a 1912 exhibition.
Yeah.
And it's a wealthy family. We even learned some at the opening night from the Kinney brothers, who it was, but he wasn't sure of the name, but he was going to get that information for us. This came from a very prominent collection, and this is, what is it, Mother and Son?
Yeah.
The title of it.
And we did want to show in oil because everybody is sort of used to seeing her watercolors. She was an outstanding watercolorist and known for that. But early on, she was an exceptional oil painter as well. So this is
a great oil, because if you look at the background, later on she got really into the pointillitic single stroke of each stroke in that sky and in the buildings is just one stroke. She didn't blend anything. And she had that masterful, big, thick stroke like George Bellows or the Ashcan school.
And again, we referenced this in the beginning with Elizabeth North's, the mother and child sort of theme that went on that women did at that time and throughout the 2 centuries. So, and here we have
We're almost there.
Burkhart.
Hang in there. Almost there.
Oh, we got more. Go ahead.
Well, we got some stuff downstairs. This is Emerson Burkhart. We all know who he is. This is one right before he got started the international school. Him and Jaeger. So this is Mound Street, and I don't think anybody's probably ever seen this piece that I know of. It was never exhibited to my knowledge. If it was, I've never seen the material. Very interesting, a little more realistic. The later pieces were very bright colored, loosely painted for the international school, which he would take groups of people, pay for his trip, of course, and he'd take them to Greece, to Hong Kong, and other places to paint. And that's how he got to travel and paint.
And again, people doing everyday things.
Yeah, genre, basically. That's a good genre.
Now we'll move on to the basement part of the gallery. There's some beautiful pieces down there. This is an Albert Foley, and I love this light in this painting. It's just gorgeous, and the impressionistic influence is there from Albert.
And he was more of a portrait painter than a lot of the Ohio governors. You don't find a lot of landscapes by him. His wife also, Lucy Foley, you'll see her work from time to time. This looks more like one of her pieces, and she did the painting that's hanging in the Columbus School for Girls, and it was of the very first head lady, head schoolmaster, school marm, whatever you would call her. She was the very first head lady of the Columbus School for Girls.
And Dave, you want to go ahead?
This is Edward Parker Hayden, who, I think these are almost the final 3 paintings anyway. Edward Parker Hayden lived in Haydenville, Ohio, after his family. His family was a very wealthy. They were almost like they owned a mill, and they sold goods. They sold flour, anything that they had the main mill in Southern Ohio. They left there and went to Haydenville, Massachusetts. So everywhere they went, they named the city after him. That's how wealthy they were.
Hey, what do you say?
His dad wanted to be a lawyer and a banker. He didn't want anything to do with it. Became a painter, very successful one, and taught the next artist, who is Maurice Haig, who lived on Sunbury Road, had a big farm there. Now you're going back to tonalism again, not bright colors. This is very tonal. It's very, it's supposed to invoke more of a mood with a type of color and kind of solitude also. Normally you'll just see trees or something it's supposed to make you melancholy. It's supposed to give you emotion. And this gentleman shared a studio with the next gentleman on 300 South High Street. This is Charles William Duval. Charles William Duval was 80 years old. He never started painting, never did his first painting until he was 42. He was 80 years old and lost his eyesight, so he could never paint. He gained his eyesight back. Well, he lost his eyesight in 53, gained it back when he was 80 years old, and started painting again, and he painted till he was 104. He had cataracts, and his work changed drastically through that time, believe me. So this is a very different Duval too, but he was known, he loved that orange. He loved an orange color.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Connie.
No, I just want to say, this note, I believe that this is our last one, but I just want to show, if you look at it's sort of the way the colors are still bright, but they muddle together to give a mood of almost fogginess, and then, Maurice Haig, same way. And am I wrong, Dave, in saying that most of Maurice Haig's paintings have that feeling of like foggy type landscapes?
I've never seen a Maurice Haig that is a true bright sunny day.
Yeah.
And most of his paintings were done at Paint Creek. He would paint Paint Creek constantly.
You'd think that would be an easy thing to accomplish, that foggy type atmosphere.
No, it's very hard.
It's not. Dave's done both, and he can account for that. So.
And there is one artist today living in Columbus that is 90, I think just turned 92. That was Duval's student, and he tells me stories all the time about Duval, and his name's Reginald Williams, and his work looks exactly like Duval. You can't tell the difference, and it's how long it's because he painted with him so long.
Really great painter.
So go ahead.
And that is our final
Painting
work that we have on the slideshow.